Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there. So I wanted to ask you both about this. So China-Trump talk up prospects for U.S.-China collaboration, right? So now all we've been hearing about for the last 4 years is war with China, legit war over Taiwan. And here is China's top diplomat urges U.S. to make the right choice. Trump calls China Xi an amazing guy, says China and U.S. can solve all the world's problems. China warns Trump not to interfere in its internal affairs. And so I often quote this guy's Twitter feed, Arnaud Betrand. He's got some great points. He says, this potentially changes everything. It looks like Trump's envisions of U.S.-China G2. He says that China and the United States can together solve all the problems in the world. And here he is saying it.
You know, because China and the United States can together solve all of the problems of the world, if you think about it. So it's very important. And, you know, he was a friend of mine. I mean, he was here for a long time, right in that spot, except sitting in a very comfortable chair. He wasn't standing like you are. But we spent hours and hours talking. And, you know, he's an amazing guy.
Have you spoken to Venezuela?
The press hates when I say that, but he's an amazing person.
Have you spoken to anyone in Venezuela?
Dictator Xi.
So he's talking about dictator Xi. So from the point of view of a citizen of Earth, I'm all for improved relationships between the U.S. and China. And so far, despite some of his hawkish appointments, all the statements by Trump himself point to that. Actions must follow, of course, which is anything but a given. But U.S. rhetoric often bears little correlation to their actions. From the point of view of Europeans, though, a U.S.-China G2 would be a strategic disaster of the highest order for Europe. In fact, it's long been something that many European strategic thinkers have warned about. If the United States and China G2 materializes without Europe at the table, it will be on the menu. A U.S.-China G2 would effectively mark an end to the undeclared war we've been witnessing these past few years and declare the United States and China to be the two winners, setting the new rules of the game together the way the winners of World War II did. Europe had de Gaulle and Churchill back then to defend its interests. There's virtually no one today to defend Europe, which is why I've long said it was so strategically dumb for Europe to blindly follow the United States and its hostile strategy against China, as one day, which looks like it may be coming soon, the United States would be bound to flip its position, leaving Europe exposed and with a damaged relationship with China. The smarter approach would have been to maintain an equally balanced relationship with both powers while building up European strategic autonomy instead of following Washington's lead on chip restrictions, decoupling initiatives, and confrontational rhetoric. Europe could have carved out its own path. The question now is whether Europe can still recover its strategic position. And unfortunately, the challenge appears nearly insurmountable. Years of strategic complacency have left Europe vulnerable at precisely the moment when strength and independence are most crucial, with a complete absence of leaders of the caliber needed to navigate such tricky waters. Love how it's already being mischaracterized by China watchers as Trump playing into Beijing's hands. And there it is. Somebody with a Ukraine flag in their thing is saying that he shouldn't be doing this. What do you have to say about this, Carol?
Well, first of all, Europe, they are paper tigers. These are people who unfortunately have lost all of their sort of strategic bargaining power and strength, and they're sort of at the mercy of whatever else is happening. And so they're trading off their status of decades ago, and they're just going to have to get whatever is given to them because that's just really the position that they put themselves in financially and otherwise. I think what Trump is doing here is very much art of the deal. One of the things that is very important for China to be at all somebody that you can negotiate with is for them to feel like they are being seen on equal footing. So whether or not Trump really actually feels that that way or anyone in America feels that way, for Trump to extend the olive branch to say, yes, we are partners, we are equals, really gives China what it wants. It gives them that feeling that, okay, we're being taken seriously, and opens up more negotiations. The reality is that China has us in a very bad strategic position. We're still very reliant on them for a lot of rare earth minerals, pharmaceutical ingredients, other supply chain ingredients. You would think we would have figured this out after COVID, but of course, that's not the case. And there are other implications from a currency perspective, an energy perspective, that's all very much intertwined. So for us to have a congenial relationship with China, that doesn't mean that we're kowtowing to them. It doesn't mean that we agree with everything that they're doing, but just something that kind of keeps things steady, I think makes a lot of sense. And I think as you see Trump's language, he's going to continue to use language that may not reflect his actual feelings, but is important to do in order to be able to keep the peace.
Now, before I go to you, Paul, this idea comes from the establishment, this G2 idea, meaning just China and the United States running the world. It comes from Zbigniew Brzezinski, Kissinger, Fred Bergsten, and there it is in an old Wikipedia. China has actually historically been very critical of it, even rejecting the very concept. Here's, for instance, what Chinese Premier told Barack Obama when the idea was floated during his administration. The main reason we don't agree with the concept of a G2 are, first, China is a developing country with a large population, and we remain clear-headed about the long road ahead to build a modernized nation. Second, China pursues an independent and autonomous peaceful foreign policy and does not ally with the country or group of countries. Third, China maintains that world affairs should be decided jointly by all countries, not dictated by one or two countries. And again, now we have the proposal coming from the United States, not China, and we can quite safely assume it will likely again face quite a lot of opposition from China. And hilariously, many on Chinese social media point out in reply to Trump's statement that China and U.S. can solve the world's problems, that most of these problems are created by the United States. And there's one. And just one more. Here's from your most recent Substack, Paul, where you have you show that when U.S. manufacturing went down, China's GDP went up because we shifted all our manufacturing over to China, and then there's U.S. debt went exactly right down with their. So what do you have to say about this latest salvo from Trump that U.S. and China can solve the world's problems?
I think it's ridiculous. God knows what comes if that's moving his first pawn out into the chessboard, what moves come next. But you literally have a government in China that is communist. They aren't just like, can IBM and Xerox get along? Can Microsoft and Apple get along? Those two businesses are seeking the same thing: happy customers, a good product, made quality, sold at an efficient price, and turn a profit and continue to live forever. Communism is the consumption of privacy, the destruction of rights. It is the ownership of all things within the country. I think if the Chinese learned something from Stalin, it's that Stalin eventually ran out of bodies. I mean, it's estimated 50 million people died to support communism in the Soviet Union because you have to have extraordinarily cheap labor to make the system work. And when you look at China's longevity, they have to have the world. If they can throw a communist blanket around the planet, because they're the manufacturing base and keep their labor very low, they can own everything inside on the planet as far as financial contributions go and consumption of goods goes, and there'll be no threat to them. They have to evacuate what the threats are to communism, and that's capitalism. They have to rein that in. They have to make us slave to their economy. They're never going to give us our manufacturing back. Our economy couldn't take the manufacturing back. You'd be taking back something that costs $3 to make the widget in China and would cost $30 to make it today in America. And that's all due to the money printing causing commodity prices to go higher and the cost of living here in America to be extraordinarily impossible to satisfy by corporate salaries paid for the workers to have the thing made here. It can't happen. Their idea, they're building a space base in Chile. Why in Chile? Because that desert gives you the clearest view of space, one of the clearest views in space on Earth. They're going to weaponize space. They take out our satellites, we're out. It's over. And they can beat us without murdering any of our citizens or firing a shot into our homeland. It's the anaconda principle. Just surround them and eventually suffocate and choke them out. The anaconda doesn't bite. It chokes you out.
So you don't see China as a potential partner?
Absolutely not. Why
you see
would
them
they?
just
Listen,
as an existential threat?
Yeah,
it's an existential threat to the U.S.
That's their design. You know, it's the old story. I think it's a frog. He gives a scorpion a ride across the river, and he says, "Please don't sting me." And he's like, "No, I won't sting you, man. I need a ride across the river. Why would I do that? I need the ride." Halfway across, the scorpion stings the frog. He goes, "Why'd you do that?" "I'm a scorpion.
That's what I do.
That's what scorpions do." So this is their DNA. And their idea for success, it's just like our politicians. They can't come out with the truth because that would be admitting complete ineptitude, uselessness, vacuous character to the American public, that they literally were an abject failure, that all of their time in Washington was a failure. That'd be like someone coming to bat every time and striking out and never getting on base. That's embarrassing. That goes against the human psyche for you know, to be able to exist, viability. So China's never going to change its game plan or its sheet music.
Carol, do you see it this way? Do you see China as an existential threat or as a potential partner?
So I don't disagree actually with most of what Paul said, but I think that there is a choreography that needs to happen, and we can't come out and act like we know this and pursue this aggressively without creating massive global chaos and potentially hurting ourselves. So, you know, are they going to be our besties, you know, forever, BFF? No, we're not exchanging little necklaces with them, but strategically, we need to, you know, keep the interim peace, because there's a lot of things that we don't have access to that if we don't get in place, and I agree, we're not going to replace the manufacturing base. They have a labor and an energy, you know, benefit to us that we're not going to be able to catch up to. But, you know, in this interim time where we're trying to make sure we've got our house in order, we don't want to poke the scorpion either, because we do know that they're going to sting us. We'd rather get that sting, you know, maybe prolong it, you know, put them on the other side of the river and not have it happen right today. So I think that there's a little bit of a middle ground, but I don't necessarily from an overarching standpoint disagree with what Paul says.
Yeah, I mean, the bonding material that forces us to be in linkage with China is we buy all the stuff they make. We order all the stuff there to be made, and we buy it here. So if we quit buying all the stuff made in China, which is what I would say, that's what I say we do. Because listen, in 10 years, 20 years, 10 months, 10 weeks, there's going to be a financial implosion. This isn't my crystal ball. I'm just trying to quote math. Not a trained economist, not a financial advisor. When you just look at it through resources, right? The dollar's worth 3 cents. 97% of the resource is gone. Eventually, all of it's gone. So there is a bust to be had. So if we said, we're not going to have anything made in China. In fact, all U.S. companies have 1 year to close every factory they have in China and have that made here. And if they can't make it here, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care, because if we don't manage through to the bust, then the bust just blows up and no one's prepared to handle it.
But Paul,
that's what I would say.
But on the other side of that, I mean, there are things, there's ingredients for our medicine.
I understand.
There's rare earth, there's, you know, precious metals that go into our bullets. Like we can't just say we're not going to buy anything from them. There are certain things you can say you can't buy from them, but if some of the stuff is cut off, then game over for us anyway.
But see, yeah, so let's say we just say anything that shows up on a Walmart shelf that's made in China can't show up on a Walmart shelf anymore in a year. Then China implodes already, and they stop sending the pharmaceuticals, and they stop sending the rare earth minerals. We have all that stuff here. We just want corporations long ago in the 80s and 90s just thought, my God, our profit margin could go up by 30% or 300% if we just cut the labor cost from the U.S. worker to the Chinese worker. But that's temporary, because just like airlines, they're always fighting and lowering their rates to get the ticket sales. So even for a time that they have this huge margin, it eventually fades away back to nothing. But now we're trapped having all of our stuff made in China. Look, 75,000 manufacturing firms in the U.S. have closed since 1990. That's 23 manufacturing firms for every county in America, including Alaska and Hawaii. Just to give you an idea of how our leadership, if that's what you want to call it, the people we elected to put in charge of the Constitution and defending our rights and interests, have literally exported all of our manufacturing, and the pharmaceutical stuff and the military stuff are just extreme examples of the lunacy and the vacuous nature of our elected officials' characters that could ever say yes to a corporation whispering in their ear Monday through Friday, let us set up our factories, or let us have the pharma made there, let us have the military technology made there, let's have it all made there because it's cheaper and it'll be good for American people. How the hell can you hear that and go, but there's a constitution, so I can't allow you to do that? They didn't stand for anything ethical or anything fundamental. And that's why we're in this situation today. We're in that Chinese finger trap where the harder you pull, the more you're stuck. That's why I say you cut it.
I say we're in the end stage of our republic, but I don't want to be that.
But mathematically, we are.
We are.
But then we get it back because this is still America, full of Americans. Only the largesse of government is keeping us from joining the pursuit of happiness here.
That may be that will never happen. They will never do that. Right? You know that won't happen.
But that's that. So
because
suggesting
our country's run by businessmen, economic hitmen in the West who don't care about this country.
Right.
They only care about making more money. So
today.
and
Just
that's,
for today. Yep.
Yes.
Right.
Isn't that the problem?
Which is very short-sighted in many cases, because they can capture the dollar today, but if that doesn't allow for the dollar tomorrow, it doesn't do them any good. And unfortunately, we have a lot of a really big short-termism problem, not with free markets, but with the cronyism that's going on, and the fact that the businesses and government can be in this together. All of the things that we've been talking about, if we had a truly free market approach and we didn't have the government tipping the scales, changing the regulations around, we would be in a very different position. So it kind of goes back to the need for small government, because the smaller the government, the less that they can tip the scales, the more competition we have, and the less we end up in these kinds of issues. So a lot of work to be done. One other thing that I will say too, as we're kind of talking about this financial reset, I will note, and I may have mentioned this to you before, Jimmy, that not every war brings about a new financial world order, but every time we have had a financial world order shift, that reset, it's been preceded by a war. Yeah. So there is usually a catalyst that brings everybody to the table where they change and they make a new agreement of, okay, we're all going to agree this debt goes away, this this is the revaluation of gold, this is whatever, to change the dynamic so we can move forward. And so that's sort of how that happens. So if we're going down that direction, that's going to be what's required in order to get the reset. And I don't think anyone wants to go through that anytime soon.
And here's just one more perspective. And Carol, tell me if you notice this to be true. What is the core of the campaign messaging here for elections in the United States? Change. Guess what the core message is when they're running for office in communist land? The same.
The same. Yeah.
Come see us on tour in Los Angeles, Honolulu, Dallas, Texas, Baltimore, Atlantic City, Cohoes, New York, and Providence, Rhode Island. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets, and only there.